Hi, this is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and today I'm going to be looking at a game from the Kasparov-Karpov rapid match that took place in 2009 in Valencia, Spain. And so Karpov had the white pieces in this game, and he played d4, and Kasparov responded with the Grunfeld. So I guess technically this is called the Neo-Grunfeld, and because white is fianchetto the bishop on g2. So following Karpov's style, he's never been known as a hard-hitting thematic player, sharp opening preparation, stuff like that. It's not really his style. And so he opts more for kind of a calm, kind of slower development as his positional style dictates. So with knight e2, he wants to avoid any kind of nasty pins with bishop g4. And essentially black's strategy is to undermine white's powerful pawn center with moves like c5, and the bishop on g7 is going to be exerting influence as well. So c5 early on, he forces d5, and now e6 immediately by Kasparov. So Kasparov is just immediately trying to latch onto those pawns in the center and break them apart so that he's going to have squares for his pieces and room to maneuver. And so castle, and now knight e3. So it's kind of a strange move, but the reason this is pretty clear a little bit later. The knight on b1 is going to be better placed either on a3 or d2. And so the knight on e2 doesn't really have a lot of good squares to go to other than to c3. I mean, knight to f4, it's kind of in the way. It's not exactly harmonious with the position. So Karpov chose knight e to c3. And so knight a6 by Kasparov, no surprise. He's probably going to open the position up, and with knight to b4, try to work the b1 to h7 diagonal. So after a4, so white wants to go ahead and disrupt black's kind of knight on b6 and kind of put the question to it, where's it going to go? And so black takes, and now knight to b4 immediately. Bishop to e3 here. So an alternative was maybe the immediate a5, but I guess after knight to c4, this was kind of an earlier game in their match, and I think it went something like this. And I feel like black had equalized pretty easily in that game. So instead of the immediate a5, Karpov tries bishop to e3, so kind of pressuring that weak pawn on c5 a little bit. And so now bishop d4. So Kasparov responds actively and backed by tactics, because the pawn on d4 is untouchable. Knight c2 is just going to win an exchange easily. So instead, Karpov pushes for complications as well. So after a5, now if black responds knight to c4, white can go ahead and take this pawn. And he's going to have a near winning advantage, because knight c2, it just doesn't work anymore. The knight's trapped on a1, and white's going to get two pieces and a pawn for the rook. So it's definitely not adequate compensation for black. So instead, a5, black just takes a3, or e3, takes the bishop, because pawn takes, and knight to c4 is going to be great for black. He's going to have a good pawn structure, and he's got these two pawns in the center kind of frozen. So he's going to have good squares for his knights. So instead, Karpov plays a takes b6. And now it's getting a little bit complicated. So black has achieved the advantage of the two bishops here, and he's definitely got active piece play. So I'm sure Kasparov is happy. He's got so many minor pieces in the center playing so actively. On the flip side, white is temporarily up a pawn, and specifically the pawn on a7 is pretty annoying. So after knight to a3, Kasparov plays rook takes a7. So he wants to go ahead and get rid of that strong pawn. And so now knight cb5, and now Kasparov makes it's I guess not too difficult of a decision here. He sacks the exchange, because if he just moves his rook, he's going to have a pretty bad position. He's down a pawn, the knight's going to come to c4, and white's queen is very centralized, taking control of a lot of dark squares in the middle. So instead of having a passive defense, he just sacks the exchange, which makes a lot of sense to me. So Also, an option here was b takes a3, and I guess Kasparov was planning just probably simply knight takes d5. Seems to be the most logical move to me, or he can even just win the exchange back. So rook takes c3 seems to be the best move, and now bishop takes b2. So Kasparov kind of changed the balance of the game here a lot. By sacrificing the exchange, he's got a pretty dynamic position. His minor pieces are excellently placed in the center, and white's knight on b5 is kind of shaky. Not to mention black's help a pawn. So he's got the two bishops and a pawn in active play for the exchange. So he's definitely got good counterplay here. And bishop g7, his king is very safe as well. So bishop d7, so he wants to remove the knight from b5 so that he can bring the dark squared bishop back to the center. And so he does. And after rook e7, so bishop a4. So Kasparov kind of had to reroute the bishop a little bit, but it's definitely exerting, it's controlling a lot of key squares in the center. And after rook c1, I think queen f6 was the decisive mistake. It's understandable that Kasparov wants to play bishop to b2 and also have the queen centralized on this dark square diagonal. It's definitely understandable, but after rook takes b7, he's got a very difficult position, because he's losing coordination of his pieces. And yeah, I think it was a lot better here. It's kind of a tough move to see. Queen to a6. It's a very strange move because black has a pretty dynamic position for attacking. But if queen takes a6, pawn takes, and all of a sudden black still has all that flow in his position. And he's controlling a lot of squares in the center. Not to mention, he's threatening the immediate bishop takes f2 check, followed by knight d3. So I think queen a6 was the move. And queen to f6, dropping the b-pawn, just didn't really make sense. But anyway, so continuing bishop b2. And it seems like here, black has got two pieces for the rook, and he should be able to hold the endgame. h4, because black can't really untangle these pieces on the queen side. There's simply nowhere to go. Knight d3 was tried by Kasparov, trying to create some complications, and now knight to c5. So it looks like here, I think Kasparov, again, I think he could have maybe gone into queen d4 made sense, trying to hold on to the pieces, which kind of forces the queen trade. So in this position, I think Kasparov still could have drawn the game because of the opposite colored bishops that's going to arise after some kind of exchange. White's going to get the two pieces for the rook. White will be up a pawn, but due to the shattered pawn structure and the opposite colored bishops, I think black's going to be able to draw the game pretty well, pretty easily. It shouldn't be too hard to set up a blockade. But instead, Kasparov tried to play for mate here with bishop to c1, so he didn't want to just take a draw. He tried to win. And, well, bishop c1 is active, so king f2. And so now he started playing for mate. Knight d3 check, king here, bishop c2. So it seems like he just had one extra move. But after rook e8, so he's definitely got some serious threats. But rook to a8 by Karpov pretty much sealed the deal. There's no the attack is not sufficient by black. Even though he's got two pieces for the rook, it's just not going to work. It's not going to be enough because white's going to queen. There's no way to stop it. So a pretty crazy game by both sides. Kasparov trying to attack very dynamically and tactically, and Karpov simply, patiently grinding away with his positional style. So this is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and thanks for tuning in.